Have proofed yeast you need to use? Want a fun and flexible meal for your family? I'm Marcy McDonald with Pacific Northwest Suburban Homesteading. Today, the homestead spouse, Scott, will demonstrate how to make Stromboli, a fun and delicious meal. It all started when I needed a use for proofed yeast from a previous video. Scott, the homestead spouse, found a delicious recipe that asked for proofed yeast, and we were off and running with a new recipe that I like very much. Stromboli, a dish reportedly invented in the US, is named for a volcano in Italy. It resembles a calzone, but is rolled like a savory jelly roll instead. It is a flexible meal that can be made with a variety of cheeses and meats, plus a little leftover pizza or pasta sauce if you like. Then the ingredients are rolled up in an easy dough, much like that used for pizza.
We got our bloomed yeast, which we're going to put in our bread bowl here. To that, we're going to add another half a cup of water. To that, we're going to give that a little bit of a stir to kind of incorporate the water with our bloomed yeast. I got 2 tablespoons of olive oil here. And a teaspoon of salt. Okay. Now that I've got this going, I have 2.5 cups of flour. I'm not going to use all of this. I'm going to slowly work the flour in to make a dough. Pour it in. All right, once we get to the point where it's annoying to work with a spoon, we need to transfer this to our cutting board with a little flour on it and start our kneading process. And it's now officially annoying to work with a spoon because it keeps sticking to the spoon. So we're going to take that and drop that up there. Go back in and get all the last little bits of it. And then just to be on the safe side, before I really start working this with my hands, I'm going to wash them again. And that's why I washed my hands before I started playing with this. Because this is sticky stuff until you get all the flour incorporated into it. And even then it's sticky. You want to be a little bit vigorous and forceful with this stuff because you're trying to actually work up some good gluten chains. If you're looking to maintain a clean kitchen, this is not the way to do it. You'll end up with flour everywhere. Part of my goal here is to work as much of the flour into this dough as I can. So I keep going back over the spots where the flour is at to get it worked into the dough. Gonna need this for about 5 minutes or so. Until you got pretty much all the flour worked in. And it's not quite as sticky as it once was. A little bit more flour than that. It's a decent workout too. If you're looking for an in-kitchen workout. One little trick says the faster you work with it, the less likely it is to stick to your board once you reach the state where you're getting just about ready to be done with it. Pretty much got all my flour in here at this point. Get that last little bit there. Work that in. And then do the whole, roll it into a nifty little ball. There we go. Okay, now I'm gonna wash my hands again real quick. Add a little bit of olive oil to this bowl I used to mix it all up in. Put the dough in there and let it rise until it's at least doubled in size. There you go. Put just a little drizzle of olive oil in there. Swirl it around a bit to kind of coat specifically the bottom of the bowl. I didn't do quite enough. A little bit more. Just trying to make it easier to get the dough out of it when it's done rising. There we go. Swirl around that. Just like that. Take that, drop it in the middle of the bowl. I'm going to cover that and let it sit for an hour or two, or until it doubles in size. You'll want to make sure this is someplace warmish. Right now it's pretty good and warm in our kitchen, so it should be just fine in here. But if you're trying to do this when it's cold, next to your fireplace or someplace else where it's good and warm, that way the bread will rise or the dough will rise correctly. We're back now. The dough has had about an hour and a half or so, and it's basically doubled in size. What we're going to do now is take it out of the bread pan and drop it on a piece of parchment paper, and we're going to roll it out, because instead of making bread with this, because this is a pizza dough, I don't want to make pizza out of this. I want to make Stromboli out of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten this dough out. There's a couple of techniques when you're making pizza dough that you actually don't want to use when you're making Stromboli. You don't want to actually have a thicker outer crust with Stromboli. You want that to be as thin as you can get it, and a little bit of dough in the middle. So instead of putting my fingers right at the edge, I'm going to put them off to the actual edge of the paper and press that down a little bit. And then I'm actually going to break out a rolling pin after I get this kind of partially rolled out the way I want it, or flattened out the way I want it. The olive oil I put in the bottom of the pan is going to help me with this a little bit. So that's actually part of the reason that I did that. Going for a kind of a rectangular shape here. I want to get the dough too thin, but I want it not as thin as I can get it without having it tear too much. Okay, at this point, I am ready to do some rolling with this. If I'm going to have a little bit of extra dough on the sides, I want it to be on the side closest to the camera, because I'm going to roll towards that part of the camera as I go. I want to make sure I know where my seam's at, because I want that baking at the bottom of the Stromboli so it doesn't blow out on me. Yeah, and a really, really big cutting board. You can do this on your big cutting board. I don't have a cutting board big enough to do this, so I'm just doing this on my clean kitchen counter and just rolling it out. There we go. Okay. Try to make this a little bit more rectangular in nature. Okay, I think that's about got what we want to do with it. We'll start the Stromboli out with a good layer of pepperoni. I'm going to start close to me. I'm basically just going to layer this entire thing with pepperoni, leaving about 2 inches on the edge that's closest to the camera, so that I can actually pull the dough over and seal it when all is said and done. But pepperoni is not going to be my only ingredient in this, so I don't want to get too rambunctious with it. If you're just doing a pepperoni and cheese stromboli, you can just layer this as thickly as you want to. But I'm also going to put some Italian sausage, peppers, and onions in this, which I have prepared ahead of time so that they would be at room temperature for the baking process. One of the cool things about Stromboli is you can pretty much fill these things up with anything you want. I've seen Strombolis made with ground beef and meatloaf mix. I've seen them made with pretty much anything you got left in the refrigerator. There's actually a modern term for them called garbage bread, which I don't like, so I'm calling them Strombolis. All right, so I got some Stromboli or some pepperoni on there. And I'm going with some nice sliced provolone as well. The same kind of thing going on here. I want a goodly layer of provolone cheese, which is of course sticking together. There we go. This is kind of a more, there's some debate about whether provolone or mozzarella is the more traditional Stromboli cheese. Go with whatever you like. Since I like cheese, I'm putting a fairly substantial amount of provolone on this here Stromboli. Okay. Kind of make it a little bit even there. There we go. And now I have some nice Italian sausage that has been fried up with some peppers and some onions. I made this sausage up just today as we were making up the video. We're going to do a video on how to make this later, but this is just all nice and fried up, and it's been left to cool to room temperature. I'm going to put about half of this on here for right now and see how much more I want to put on. You don't want to overfill the Stromboli too much because you need to be able to roll it up. Actually, I think I will end up using the whole thing. Or most of it, at least. Yeah, looks like I'm going to use the whole thing. So this was just 1 pound of ground pork that I put some seasonings into, and then added an onion and a couple of cups of frozen peppers out of our freezer. We grow our own peppers and freeze them. as some of you may be aware. There we go. Make that as nice and even as I can get. One thing I want to do is make sure I don't have any filling on my edges, because that will make sealing the Stromboli a little bit harder and cause blowouts. That's when your Stromboli actually blows out of its crust. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to use my parchment paper, which is the whole reason I put this on parchment paper, to kind of help me with the roll. I'm going to bring this up and over. Pull the parchment paper away from the dough as I do it. And this is basically going to be kind of like almost like a cinnamon roll type of roll-up thing. There are other ways of making Stromboli. Some people can actually just fold the dough up over and seal it in just a single layer of dough. I'm not that good if I roll it up like a cinnamon roll. And once I've got that rolled up, I'm going to make sure my ends are nice and tucked in and sealed. Move this a little bit off the parchment. There we go. Move it back just a little bit so I've got a little bit of flexibility on my parchment paper here to finish the roll. There we go. So what I'm looking for here is there's a little seam you can see right here at the bottom. What I want to make sure of is that that ends up, when I put this on the baking sheet, that ends up on the bottom of the Stromboli, so that the weight of the Stromboli will help seal it and keep it nice and tight. Now I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to reuse this parchment paper on my sheet pan. So I want to kind of angle my Stromboli a little bit, because my sheet pan's not quite big enough to take this Stromboli in its full horizontal configuration, but it is perfectly fine to take it as a diagonal. Got my egg wash made up. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to cut some venting slits in here to help the inside of the Stromboli cook at the same pace as the outside. A couple of different things you can do on this. If you kind of take a rough estimate of how big you want your slices of Stromboli to be and cut your venting slits along that area, you've basically given yourself a guide. Now that I got my venting slits cut, I'm just going to put a bit of an egg wash on this so that it browns up nice and golden brown and delicious. I've had my oven preheating at 375. And what we're going to do is we're going to stick this in the oven at 375 for about 35 minutes. We'll check it about 20 minutes in and see how it's going and see how much longer it needs to cook. There's a lot of variability in how long this cooks. Depends on what you actually have inside your Stromboli, what the moisture content is, the temperature outside, the humidity of any given day. So what you want to do is you want to take a look at it and see if it's all nice and puffed up and golden brown and delicious, or if it needs to cook a little bit longer. There we go. Now I have my baking sheet here. And I'm just going to cheat, like I said, and use my parchment to pick the whole thing up. And holy crap, it's too big even for my baking sheet. Okay. So I made this a little bit too big for my baking sheets. Unfortunately, we have a kind of a weird shaped oven. It's not won't take a full size baking sheet. It only takes these little 3/4 size ones. So transferring it to a cookie sheet for cooking. I'm going to stick it in the oven at 375. We'll check it in about 20.
Let's take a look. Ooh, look at all that tastiness. But it still definitely needs at least another 10 minutes, probably 15.
All right, so we've been in the oven for about 40 minutes now, and I think we're about ready to pull it out. That looks gorgeous. All right, now we have to let this sit as much as we don't want to because it smells awesome and I want to cut into it and eat it. But we gotta let it sit for a little bit to finish setting up and to cool down a little bit. So we're gonna give it about 5 minutes of cooling and then we'll eat it. So this has been resting long enough for us to cut it. I don't want to cut it directly on my baking sheet. I'm going to move it over to my cutting board. I don't have a big enough cutting board, so we're going to improvise here a little bit. Take the parchment paper and just shift right over there, kind of into the middle of my cutting board with it. We're going to cut this right in the middle first and see what it looks like all nice and done. That's about the middle. Oh, look at that. Oh, that looks damn good. Okay, now I'm going to cut this into a couple slices and serve it. There we go. And there we have dinner for tonight.
Use caution if you use parchment paper when baking your stromboli. Our paper was a bit too close to the heating element and singed. Fortunately, no harm came from it. Thanks for watching our successful tryout of a new recipe. Sometimes great things can come from necessity. I didn't want to waste the yeast we proofed, and Scott found a recipe that has joined the file for meals we will make again. I hope you will try out stromboli with whatever meat, cheese, or vegetable combinations suit your fancy, and enjoy it as much as we did. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. Until next time, be curious, keep an open mind, and never stop learning.